Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Okay, can you hear me?
I can hear you, yeah.
Okay, wonderful. So we're live now, and against previous expectations and announcements, so this is being recorded. So, and it is a dialogue, in fact, and not a trialogue or a monologue. We've got more than one of us and less than three of us in the room, so that makes just two of us. So it's nice to have you on, Brecht. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam.
And I think it might be nice because this is a kind of, now it is a dialogue. So I think being in this kind of situation, let me just ask you maybe formally before we begin, you do agree to be recorded, is that right?
Yes, I agree, no problem.
Excellent. So we have something to share with the team because initially I had said we weren't going to record, but now we've agreed in consensus that we are going to record. So see, this is a good example of ijma according to Zaydi Bukhari madhab, okay? Because normally in most of the madhab in Islam, and now you're about to find out where you are, okay? So when you're on our chat page and what we do. So normally in Islam, when the scholars take an ijma, it's a valid ijma and it's valid for 1,400 years, yeah? And but not with us. So we reserve the right, and in fact, it's an obligation to revise ijma in our madhab, which is to say, if either extenuating circumstances provoke it, like some kind of act of God or act of war, or some really critical emergency situation, or simply if 3 generations of life have passed, of human life have passed, and there hasn't been a revision of an ijma in the past 3 generations, we actually reserve the right and actually have the obligation to review the ijma and start from the very beginning, asking the question, posing the question that was posed, or perhaps even posing a new question or posing it in a new framework, of course, because today's framework will never be the same as yesterday's framework. And yesterday's framework will never be the same as tomorrow's framework, right? So we have the obligation basically to revise ijma and if necessary, provide a new ijma. Okay. And what that means is always different. What does that mean, we? Okay. I don't know how familiar you are with the Zaydi madhab or with madhabs in general, with the system of madhahib. Maybe you can give me a short, I'd love to hear, since we are interviewing, I'd love to hear, or interviewing each other, I'd love to hear your story once again of how you came to Islam, if you don't mind sharing it again.
Yes, okay, no problem. Yeah, so my journey to Islam, well, my official acceptation of Islam came about 6 years ago. Okay. Under the influence of, alhamdulillah, under the influence of the woman who would eventually end up being my wife, who I am now married to since 2015. Thank you. Before that, I've always been interested in, let's say, in learning about religions, in theology and matters such as that. I am as education, I am a historian. I finished my studies in history. So I have always been quite fascinated by, especially by the, let's say, the Eastern cultures and what is colloquially called the Middle East in the West. So let's say Western Asia, Arab, Persian, and cultures and such as that. So that was already my specialization to learn about and to read about back when I was in university.
Okay.
So I know a certain share of information regarding the basic tenets of Islam. I knew that already a little bit, and even back in the day, I growing up here in Belgium, I grew up in what is considered a very typical family in terms of religion, which means is that we were officially Catholic, but in reality, religion didn't really play much of a role. I see that we have another guest coming on.
Yeah, I know. That's all. Assalamu alaikum, Hassan. It's nice to welcome you. Let's continue with Brecht, please. Go ahead.
Yeah. So yeah, the religion never really played a major role in our life when I grew up, but that was something that I always found a little bit a certain spirituality lacking in my life. There was always something that bothered me.
Right.
And so in learning about the different religions, starting with Catholicism, because that is what we were traditionally expected to follow. I kind of just went along and eventually found my way to Islam, alhamdulillah.
Right.
Of course, then in terms of the madhabs, I knew certain basic principles. Officially, when I reverted to Islam, I reverted in a typical Moroccan masjid here, so a very, let's say, typical Sunni Maliki, I believe, but it was not something. The madhabs are not something that really play a major role, or they don't talk much about it because it's already Muslims are already such a relatively small minority in the country that they don't really split up so much based on madhab. More like they are usually divided based on ethnicity, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's how it is. That's
always the case, right?
Yeah.
So
culture is incredibly, if I just stop you there, culture is incredibly powerful and it's very underrated. So everybody thinks that they're doing things because of scholarly reasons, and it's just not true at all. I was having the discussion with a Hanafi the other day from eastern part of Asia, and I was telling him about how Hanafi Islam is practiced in Turkey, where I've been, more than 60 times for family and business reasons, and it's just completely different. He was just, he couldn't believe what I was telling him. I was like, yeah, but that's the way it's done here, and they all have scholarly methodologies, and they all claim to be right, and they all claim to be Hanafi. So if you go from Hanafi in Indonesia or in Southeast Asia, in India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and you compare it with the Hanafis in the Levant or in Turkey, in the old Ottoman sphere, it's a very different form of Hanafi Islam.
Yes,
so
definitely.
Culture is triumphant. And in fact, in the business world, there's a nice saying, which is that culture eats strategy for breakfast. So that kind of tells you many times what you see going on in the Islamic world, even though people are not realizing it. The feminine often overpowers the masculine, but in an unnoticed way. Okay. So watch out. Okay, so I've interrupted, so please continue.
Yeah, no, that is something that originally. So I was in what is considered, let's say nowadays, a very standard Orthodox, quote unquote, Orthodox Sunni environment, especially also since my the family that I married into, the majority of whom, or everyone actually except for my wife herself, lives still in Malaysia. When I got in contact with in Malaysia itself, it's considered almost, it goes without saying that every Muslim in Malaysia is considered to be by law a Sunni, and more specifically a Shafi'i Sunni, because that is just considered to be the way of doing things. And there are indeed, like you said, quite some cultural habits and cultural traditions that are considered part and parcel of how they practice Islam in Malaysia. And in fact, the very idea of preaching a non-Sunni or even non-Shafi'i methodology in Malaysia is heavily frowned upon. So for the first couple of years, let's say, I never really had a major, I didn't really delve too much deeper into the different madhabs that existed up until I started reading more and more. I started out with the typical, the starting books written about Islam, sometimes by theologians who were not necessarily Muslims themselves, like Karen Armstrong is a writer who wrote a lot about Islam. And then eventually I worked my way up into learning a bit more about Islamic history. And in that way, I got more interested in the, let's say, the alternative, the other madhabs that existed. And specifically, of course, the Shia view of the succession of Ali ibn Abi Talib and the necessity of of resistance and the leadership of the Imams. So I weighing those things off for a while, and having I have always had several, let's say, minor points of disagreements with all the madhabs that I knew up until that point. For example, of course, when you say Shia, it's almost automatically referred to as what is in fact the Ja'afari school, right? Which is the 12 infallible imams, and the idea of let's say that the father to son, like passing on of the imam title without the necessity of an election, basically. And of course the occultation, which were matters that I had some issues with. The idea that the 12 imam went into occultation and were just waiting for him to return. So I had some issues with the traditional what is considered the 4 Sunni schools, and with that one school that is the major one in the Shia
Mhm.
schools of thought, until I happened upon, I don't exactly know how exactly I found out the first information of the Zaidi madhab, but I think that had to do with the fact that I kept my interest in West Asian politics and geopolitics alive after my college years as well.
Right.
And then what I did is I did some freelance writing, and I still do, regarding conflicts such as in Syria and also in Yemen. We have a group of people who write quite a lot about Yemen, and I think through that, the knowledge of what was going on in Yemen and wanting to know what exactly is the difference, why exactly are the Yemenis considered to be such a danger by the Saudis? Why do they specifically want to target them so much? Except for the economical reasons, obviously, the strategic location of Yemen. But there seems to be a very distinct hatred towards the Zaidi school in Yemen. And reading up more and more and more about that, and getting to know some fellow Zaidis through online, just like us, right? I eventually, a couple of years back, kind of had the idea, like, this is the school I want to follow. This is the madhab that I'm in most with, in terms of the necessity of resistance. You know, the enjoying the good, forbid the evil, and then practice that in reality. And their history of standing up against tyranny, even if that tyranny is, I find that very important, even if the tyranny is executed by a ruler who is officially Muslim.
Who is nominally Muslim, right? That's a very, very important point. That's a very important point. Absolutely, absolutely. So because, and in fact, this may be the key. This is crazy that you mentioned this so early in the discussion. We didn't think we were talking about Israel-Palestine, but actually we were. Because the big issue theologically in all of the schools currently active and proactive in Islam is exactly this, that they all have kind of degraded into kind of pre-accepted, solidified, iron-cast forms and molds, which make it essentially impossible to overstep a certain set of boundaries, particularly with respect to authority, right? And this may sound very abstract, but it's actually very critical, because all of these Muslim countries that are surrounding, if you look at the Levant, you know, and the kind of, let's call it the Near East, for lack of a better term, they're all governed by nominally Muslim authorities. I mean,
of course.
And everyone, if you talk on the floor to the people who are, you know, whether it's in Turkey or whether it's in Jordan or whether it's in Egypt or Morocco or, you know, Lebanon, whether Sunni or Shia or Iran or, you know, all of the people on the floor say, well, you know, we want a free and a unified Palestine, and we want it now, right? Let's not go into the Israel question yet, but just on the Palestine issue, right? And we all want Al-Aqsa as our mosque, and we want, you know, Jerusalem, at least East Jerusalem, as a safe haven for Muslims to live and pray and basically practice their faith. So, but you can't rebel. So if you're lucky, you have more or less a democracy, like in Turkey. You could vote the guy out if you didn't like him. I happen to like the guy. Somebody else might not. They could vote for someone else, right? I don't think you'll find anyone in Turkey doing more for Palestine than Tayyip at the moment. That's another question. If you find him, please show him to me. I'm happy to talk with him, but I don't think you will. But again, even if you didn't like him, you know, the only way to really rebel in that sense would be through the democratic process, right? And in Turkey, you're lucky that you have a democratic process. But otherwise, if you're in Saudi, if you're in the Gulf, if you're in the Levant, if you're in Egypt, any of these, you know, countries around the area of Palestine, which are supposed to be helping Palestine and obviously are doing absolutely the opposite, right? If you don't like the ruler, it's kind of tough luck. You're not really allowed to do anything. It would be considered treason, or let's say it would be even almost, according to certain schools, even a kufr, yeah, to do it.
Yeah.
So this mind block really exists so powerfully for most of the Muslims in this region that they're not even aware of it, right? And as you rightly said, you know, the Zaidi school is per se different, right? It's just okay, if you don't like it, go and change it, right? Which is even if you're just three guys like us in a virtual chat, right? Talking some nonsense, yeah. So this fundamental kind of mind block, and I won't use a different word for block, basically fundamentally hinders many Muslims from actually following through and achieving what needs to be achieved if we were to work toward some kind of a free and unified Palestine, because clearly the authorities that are in power now don't want it, okay? And it doesn't matter if it's, I won't name too many countries, but Saudi is an obvious example, right? The Emirates are another example. The current regime in Egypt is another example. They tried Morsi for a few years. You know, he didn't have the support, so he was out. And basically, you know, whether you use democratic or other means, but without changing these governments, you're not going to get to, you know, where you want to get. And that's the bottom line, okay? So this point that you mentioned is a fundamentally, you know, relevant point of the Zaidi madhab that differentiates it from, I would say, all of the rest of the madhab, because all of the madahib, because in Jafari school, you know, you're somehow following an occulted imam. Even as a Zaidi myself, I won't say it's not true. I won't say, you know, I won't take a position on whether the Imam alayhi salam is alive or coming or whatever. That's not the question. The fact is, there's no one having any kind of exchange with him, and there's no one even claiming to do so. So even the Iranians doing the Velayat fiqh, right?
Yeah.
Even they don't claim to have some kind of esoteric contact with the guy, and okay, he's giving me messages, I'm receiving messages, and I'm telling you what has to be done. It's not like that. They're just saying, in the absence of the Mahdi alayhi salam, we have to govern through a structure of basically jurisprudence that they're calling velayat fiqh. Okay, so even the Iranians are bound to some kind of unmovable, unchangeable structure, despite their Shia expression of belief, okay? So this really indicates the Zaidi madhab not only as one where, and we were talking about ijma and how it's always kind of revitalized and how it can adapt maybe more than the other madhahib to changing environments, and environments are changing more today than ever before, right? So that's one necessity of the Zaidi madhab, and another one is certainly this issue of being able to lead a resistance and follow through if necessary, yeah, in whatever form. And I happen to prefer a democratic form, and there are people who prefer different things, yeah. But so thank you for touching on that. And if I may, Brecht, just to continue to welcome Hassan into the group. So I don't know if you can hear us, Hassan.
I hear you perfectly.
Okay, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
So it's very nice to have you in the call. We're a bit of a smaller group than originally anticipated, but it's obviously great to have you on board. I just want to advise you that we took a different ijma with Brecht, which was to record the session. So I hope it's okay for you that this is being recorded and will be posted. Otherwise, we will simply stop the recording and throw it out.
I agree, Huli. No problem.
Wonderful. Okay, that's wonderful. So we can continue. So great. So we were just having a bit of an intro call with Brecht, and he was telling us what his background was and how he came to Zaidi madhab, because we hadn't the opportunity yet to speak. So Hassan, we've met in the last call, so it's nice to have both of you, relatively newer guys, on board now. And the issue for today is obviously Israel-Palestine and the recent tragedy really that occurred really kind of childish. I was kind of surprised about this. One thing that the children of Israel do very well is strategy and tact. They're typically very strategic and very tactful what they do. And I was very surprised that they took the occasion of kind of Ramadan, you know, the last part of Ramadan, when they know that the Muslims are basically celebrating and about to close their fasting season to start the attacks, you know. I thought that that really called my attention because normally the Israelis are very careful with that kind of thing. They don't want to look like the bad guys in the public eye. And they have a much better understanding of the public eye than the Muslims. And in fact, if you were to rate on a scale of 1 to 10, where the Israelis are in their understanding of how a modern day digital mass media works and where the Muslims are, definitely you'd have to put the Israelis at a 9 or a 10, and the average Muslim, and certainly the proactive Muslim, you'd have to put him like at a 1, okay, or like at a 2 maybe. Maybe we who are having this chat, we might think we're a 3, okay, but we're definitely not a 9 or a 10, yeah. So there's clearly a gap in capacity for vision and strategy, very, very easily visible between what the Israeli government and state are doing and what our kind of people and governments are doing. Yeah, it's just a massive gap in vision and strategy, and this is why I wanted to kind of highlight this issue first and foremost in this call and get a taste in the mouth from you guys. What is your vision and strategy before we proceed to maybe everyone can name some kind of operational action that they'd be willing to do toward that if they'd like. Yeah, but this was the reason that I chose this subject, because I think, you know, you can make any kind of crazy detailed plan that you want, but if you don't have the big picture and you don't understand at a high level how things are supposed to get done, you'll never craft a strategy that would basically bring you to a successful conclusion, yeah? And maintain the successful conclusion over a valuable extended period of time, okay? So that's a very polite way for me to say that we Muslims are idiots, okay? And if you look at the geostrategic situation, that's definitely what it is, unfortunately. And we have to get better, okay? We just have to get better. There's no way around it. And so I'll be happy to share my vision and my operational kind of little task for that, but I'd love to, maybe we start with Hassan now. So maybe Hassan, if you'd like to be the first to share what you've brought with you for a vision or a strategic approach to this current Israeli-Palestine issue, if you would, please.
I'm very sorry to disappoint you, but I am very bad acquainted with international policies, and here I am participating just to take from your wisdom.
Okay, that's totally fine. So since you don't know anything, let me put it this way. Are you interested to know about this issue? Is this an interesting topic for you?
Yes, it is definitely.
Okay, why is it interesting for you if you don't know then? What makes it? It's not a critical question. I'm just asking you. What is it that makes it interesting for you? I'm asking you.
On the ground level, it is because we humans, we are living together and we are related one to another.
Mm-hmm.
So it helps me to understand how human community
Mm-hmm.
works on the big scale altogether.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I think that's a very nice answer. So that kind of starts to go in the direction of brotherly love. And as we all know, two people may be brothers, but they may not get along, right? Or they may have problems in the in-between. So if you don't mind my asking, Hassan, just to have you participate a little bit, what is it about brotherly love that carries importance? Or if you look at the Israel-Palestine issue, do you think that Israelis and Palestinians are brothers?
Yes, because I think that every two human beings are brothers.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Well, I think that's the most fundamental thing that could be said about this issue. I couldn't find a thing that were more profound and more fundamental to this issue than what you just said. Okay. So I think having said that, you'll definitely have to participate more since you said the most important thing. You'll definitely have to participate. So, but thank you very much. That's a very, very good starting point. And I would say I would follow that up with the next question, which is, and I'm asking you again, Hassan, if you'd like to continue, if Israelis and Palestinians are brothers, what has happened in this family tragedy? What is the mess, or what is the point of where did this all start, do you think? How can two brothers end up like this? And how could they heal? If you were looking at it as a family, let's not talk about Israel and Palestine. Let's take two brothers who are just not getting along. So if two brothers are not getting along, you know, what could be the reasons for that, and how would you bring them back together?
Okay, particularly in the example with Israelis and Palestinians, I cannot point where exactly the problems start, but what I see in the moment, I think that maybe the a bigger part of the problem is what is inherited from the previous years. I mean that let's say you are newborn Palestinian or you are newborn Israeli, and then your parents, they are teaching you, for example, that the other side are the bad guys, and so when you are looking to them with this prejudice, it is enough already to multiply any kinds of let's say problems that were before.
Mm-hmm. 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 So, yeah. So
And
basically, yeah. Go ahead.
one more thing.
Please.
Also, I already said I am completely new to this file, and maybe the things I am saying they're complete nonsense, but just what also I think or I imagine the situation to be that maybe on the level, because I can give as example here Bulgaria, let's say the Muslim minority and the Christian majority. Alhamdulillah, we are in very good relation, but at least in the last let's say 20 or 30 years, the politicians, every one of them, they are trying to use to divide us for political dividends.
Right.
So
Right.
I think, but we, the normal people, the normal guys, Christians and Muslims, which know directly each other's, we know each other very well and we are in very good relations. But let's say if this political nonsense continue to be intensively showed on media and so on, I will be not surprised if some conflicts begin to happen between us. And the same thing, I think that also the big part of the problem there on the political level, that the leaders of the one side and the leaders on the other side are leading their nations in the wrong directions. But if between the normal people on one side and other side, if it would to happen that they have a more close relation, if that it happened that they knew each other face to face and so on, every one of them will see that another human as him is in the other side, and there is no reason each of them to hate the other.
Right. Absolutely. So, in fact, these are two great points that you made. So, on the one hand, certainly education and kind of cultural environment, right? Cultural environment and education are key to uniting or dividing people. And you took the nice example of a Palestinian being born in Gaza or an Israeli being born in Tel Aviv and or in a settlement, and what kind of let's say education and cultural environment they would be subjected to, which could bring them already in a direction of kind of not loving each other. But it's also, as you said, the politicians that draw these kind of cheap short-term dividends from divide and conquer strategies, right? So I think you've identified two very important points there, and so of course the easy thing to do might be to say, okay, so use some kind of means, whether democratic or otherwise, maybe democratic to start with, to bring people together again, or what would be your idea there, Hassan? And I'd like to point out that I'll have to interrupt you in about 2 minutes because we're going to send around another link, okay? Because the 40 minutes of this Zoom call will be over, and then I'll send a second link, and I hope that you both join again, yeah? But maybe you can just quickly tell me, Hassan, from your point of view, and then of course we'll get Brecht back into this in the next session. You've pointed out two very important issues, which are the kind of cultural prejudice already at birth in Israel and Palestine, respectively, and also the politicians kind of drawing cheap dividends from such a divide and conquer tactics. So how would you resolve that issue? At what level does this have to be or can be resolved?
I have no idea.
I think that's where we all are, right? Okay. Let's leave that question in the air and take it with us for the next session. I'll be sending a link in a moment. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
No problem.